gather round and quiet your hearts, for the tale I am to spin is not one of gentle knights or benevolent kings. No, this is a story etched in the very marble of Rome itself. A saga that smells of incense and poison, of piety and perversion. It is the story of a family who saw the throne of St. Peter not as a seat of spiritual servitude, but as the ultimate worldly prize. It is the story of the Borgias. Before them, the papacy had its share of sinners, of men who loved gold more than God. But the Borgias, they were different. They were a masterpiece of ambition, a symphony of sin conducted with such audacious brilliance that even their enemies could only watch in horrified awe. They did not simply break the rules, they rewrote the very definition of power. Our story begins not in Rome, but in the sun-scorched earth of Valencia, Spain, with a man named Alonso de Borja. He was clever, he was ambitious, and through shrewd maneuvering, he climbed the ecclesiastical ladder to become Pope Callixtus III. He was the first Borgia Pope, the one who opened the door. He was old, his reign short, but he did one thing that would change the course of history. He brought his nephews to Rome, and one of them was Rodrigo Borgia. Imagine him. Even as a young cardinal, there was an electricity about him. He was handsome with a commanding presence, dark eyes that missed nothing, and a charm that could disarm kings and beguile women with equal ease. He possessed a boundless energy, not for prayer or fasting, but for life in all its messy, carnal glory. While other cardinals debated theology, Rodrigo was mastering the far more practical arts of law, diplomacy, and the acquisition of wealth and power. He fathered numerous children, a scandal he barely bothered to conceal. Chief among them, his beloved instruments of power were Cesare, Juan, Lucrezia, and Joffre, born to his longtime mistress, Vanozza de Catane. For decades, Rodrigo waited, watching, learning, accumulating bishoprics and abbeys like a child collecting toys. He became the vice-chancellor of the church, a position of immense wealth and influence. He was patient. He knew his time would come, and it did in the sweltering August of 1492. As the cardinals gathered in the Sistine Chapel, the air thick with intrigue, Rodrigo put his life's work into motion. The papacy was not to be won with prayers, but with promises. One cardinal was promised a palace, another a lucrative abbey. Gold, land, titles, he traded them all for votes. The story is told that on the final night, 4 mules laden with silver were led from Rodrigo's palace to that of a key rival, sealing the deal. When the white smoke finally billowed from the chimney, it was not the Holy Spirit who had chosen the new pope, but the cold, hard logic of simony. Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia became Pope Alexander VI. Rome held its breath. The city had seen corruption, but this was something else. This was a coronation of avarice. Alexander VI was not a shepherd to his flock. He was a king, and the papal states were his kingdom, the church his treasury, and his children his royal dynasty. First there was Juan, the favorite, handsome, charming, but vain and utterly useless. Alexander showered him with titles, making him Duke of Gandia and commander of the papal armies. He was meant to be the secular sword of the family, the one who would carve out a kingdom for the Borgias in the heart of Italy. Then there was Cesare. If his father was the architect of the family's ambition, Cesare was its soul, its fire and its darkness. He was brilliant, ruthless, and filled with a terrifying, restless energy. He possessed none of his father's easy charm. Instead, he had an unnerving intensity, a predatory stillness. Forced into the church against his will, he was made a cardinal at 17, a prince of the church who despised its gilded cage. He watched his brother Juan, whom he deemed inferior, receive the military glory he craved, and a bitter jealousy took root in his heart. And then there was Lucrezia. History has painted her as a monster, a poisoner, a creature of incestuous lust. The truth is perhaps more tragic. She was a pawn, the most beautiful pawn in her father's grand chess game. At just 13, her golden hair and innocent blue eyes were assets to be traded. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza was a political alliance. When the Sforzas were no longer useful, the marriage had to be undone. The humiliation was total. Giovanni was forced to publicly declare himself impotent to secure the annulment, a lie that forever stained his name, while Lucrezia was branded as the damaged bride. The Vatican under Alexander VI became a theatre of decadence that would have made the Roman emperors blush. Banquets turned into orgies, but behind the hedonism was a cold, calculating purpose. While the Pope distracted the world with spectacle, he and Cesare were consolidating power. Their chief obstacle was the proud, ancient baronial families of Rome, the Orsini and the Colonna, who had long treated the papacy as their personal plaything. The Borgias meant to break them. The first great crack in the family's carefully constructed edifice appeared in 1497. The body of Juan, Duke of Gandia, was dragged from the Tiber River, his fine clothes pierced by 9 dagger wounds. Rome was rife with speculation. Was it a vengeful husband, the vengeful Orsini? Or was it something closer to home? Suspicion fell, dark and unspoken, upon his own brother. Cesare never shed a tear. Soon after, he did the unthinkable. He became the first person in history to resign the cardinalate. Casting off his red robes for the steel armor he had always coveted, he declared his life's motto: Aut Caesar, aut nihil, either Caesar or nothing. With Juan gone, Cesare was unleashed. Bankrolled by the church's treasury, selling indulgences and creating new cardinal positions to be sold to the highest bidder, he forged a formidable army. He swept through the Romagna region of Italy, a patchwork of petty tyrants and rebellious towns, and conquered it with a blend of brilliant military strategy and absolute terror. His cruelty was legendary, an art form. To pacify one conquered city, he installed a notoriously cruel lieutenant, Ramiro de Orco, to crush all dissent. When the city was thoroughly cowed and the people hated de Orco, Cesare rode into the town square one morning to find a spectacle he himself had arranged. De Orco's body, cut cleanly in two, laid out for all to see. In one stroke, he had pacified the city and appeared as its liberator from the very tyranny he had installed. It was this chilling pragmatism that so fascinated a young Florentine diplomat who observed him, a man named Niccolò Machiavelli, who would later use Cesare as the primary model for his masterwork, The Prince. Meanwhile, Lucrezia was married again, this time to the handsome Alfonso of Aragon, Duke of Bisceglie. By all accounts, it was a love match, a rare moment of genuine happiness in her life. But the political winds shifted. The alliance with Naples soured, and Alfonso became an inconvenience. One evening, he was attacked by assassins on the steps of St. Peter's. He survived, but as he recovered in the Borgia apartments, with Lucrezia nursing him, a trusted captain of Cesare's entered the room, cleared everyone out, and calmly strangled the young duke in his bed. Cesare, it was said, remarked coolly, "What is not accomplished at noon can be accomplished at night." Lucrezia was heartbroken, but her tears meant nothing. A new, more powerful alliance was needed. She was married off a third time to Alfonso d'Este, heir to the powerful Duchy of Ferrara. This time, she would escape Rome's shadow. establishing herself as a respected and beloved duchess, a patron of the arts, finally free from the bloody machinations of her father and brother. Back in Rome, the Borgia machine was at its zenith. Their enemies were dead, exiled or silent. The treasury was full. Cesare stood as the most feared man in Italy. Alexander VI surveyed his work with pride. He had secured his family. He had built a dynasty. He had tamed Rome. It seemed they were invincible. But in the game of power, the board can be overturned in an instant. In August of 1503, after a dinner at the villa of a wealthy cardinal, both Pope Alexander and Cesare fell violently ill. Fever, vomiting, the blackening of the skin, all signs pointed to poison. The eternal irony is that they may have been the victims of their own favorite weapon. Perhaps the poisoned wine intended for their host was served to them by mistake. Or perhaps it was simply malaria, the deadly Roman summer fever. The Pope, now 72, could not fight it. His death was grotesque. His body, it was said, swelled and blackened so rapidly that it barely fit into its coffin. And the stench was so vile that workmen had to force the lid shut with their feet. The man who had lived with such opulence was buried with little ceremony, his reign of terror over. Cesare, younger and stronger, clung to life. He survived, but he emerged from his sickbed a broken man. His power, he discovered, was entirely derived from his father's. Without the Pope's authority and treasury, his armies deserted him. His enemies, smelling blood, returned from exile. The new Pope, a bitter rival of the Borgias, stripped him of his lands and had him arrested. The man who would be Caesar, who had terrorized Italy, suffered a final, humiliating downfall. He escaped prison, fled to Spain, and in 1507 found his end not in a grand battle for a kingdom, but in a pathetic minor skirmish in a muddy field, fighting for his brother-in-law, the King of Navarre, ut Caesar, ut nihil. In the end, it was nothing, and so the meteor that was the house of Borgia burned out. Their name became a byword for every sin they had perfected. Corruption, nepotism, simony, murder. They were monsters, yes, but they were also products of a monstrous age, men and women of the Renaissance, in all its glorious, terrible contradictions. Pious in public, pagan in private, lovers of art and beauty, who walked hand in hand with violence and death. They sought to build an eternal dynasty, to carve their name into the heart of Italy. But in the end, their only lasting legacy was this story, a cautionary tale whispered in the shadow of St. Peter's, of a family who flew so close to the sun, not on wings of faith, but on wings of ambition, only to fall back to earth, leaving behind a memory as seductive and as poisonous as their legend.